Welcome to the Cult Film Showdown's controversial Saturday morning cartoon series. This is the finale of a 10-episode look at R-rated properties turned into G-rated cartoons. I am Jim Cotta, leading you through this trip down memory lane. I am joined by Nick Boxer.
Cool night.
And also Jocular Jack Hall.
Ooh.
All right. Well, this is our last one. It's been a really fun series to look at. I had seen almost none of these. I think I had seen just Rambo and Chuck Norris before we went into this, so it's been a ton of fun. And we've reached the end with one of the curious ones because Tales from the Crypt has a longer history than this cartoon or the show. So let's Jack, give us some context for what Tales from the Crypt is.
Originally, Tales from the Crypt was a comic book from EC Comics in the 50s that was very controversial at the time for its level of violence and is partially responsible for the Comic Code Authority being created in order to monitor the level of violence that was being subjected to the children of the time, because, well, that's a whole other podcast. And in fact, I think We Talk Comics might have even done that podcast.
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, please.
Where they went into it in much better detail than I will. But so I mean, this is a property that was being around for a long time, and it became in I believe it was '89. They started, or it might have been earlier. Let's just double check that. No, it was '89. Tales from the Crypt started on HBO. And a lot of the stories are based on the stories that were in the comic books, as are a lot of the cartoons, including the episode we're doing right now, which was based on the, I believe, Tales from the Vault, or Horror from the Vault, or something like that. Number 34, I believe, is this issue that this episode was based on. The Tales from the Crypt has a little bit of foul language and a little bit of nudity. It's largely, some episodes are bloodless. Some episodes are disgustingly bloody. Certainly the films they did, Bordello Blood, as an example, extremely hardcore property. So the fact that they took this and made this into a children's property, even though it retains the horror elements, it's children's horror. For ages 7 and up is the target audience of this one, and the fact that they did that was viewed very oddly at the time. People were really not too sure about it. It aired on ABC. It was created by Nelvana. This is a Canadian production company that's done like Ewoks and Droids in the 80s and Beetlejuice and Fairly Odd Parents and just tons of Franklin the Turtle, just tons of properties over their almost 50 years of existence. So it actually is, it's very much kidified, as they had to with the property, but is fairly well recognized as a high quality program. And I'm interested to hear what you guys thought of the quality of the show, because it's got its fans.
You go ahead, Nick.
Okay. Let's just get the plot out of the way, because I mean the plot is nothing special. We open up with the Cryptkeeper. He tells some really corny jokes, as he should. Lots of puns. They were funnier than I expected. I think equal to the live action show. And then we cut to a couple kids riding their bikes. They decide they want dirt bikes, but they can't afford it. They learn from their dad there's a rich guy in town. They go, well, he's going out of town because their dad's a travel agent. Let's go rob his house.
Good plan.
Sorry?
It's a good plan. Solid.
Yeah, good plan. So they ride their bikes up to his house and knock on the door, and nobody's home. So they break in and they're wandering around the house, and all of a sudden they start running into monsters. First we get a werewolf or giant dog. Then we get a ghoul. Then we get a octopus monster in a tank. And then we find a bunch of zombie or vampires. And then we find a bunch of more zombies, I guess. And their reaction to each monster is to run away through the house. And they just keep finding more monsters and like that. Really, it's a little bit of fun, but that's all it is. It's kids running away from monsters. I enjoyed it, and then at the end they run out of the house, and the Crypt Keeper is there again. He tells another joke, and it's all over. The only thing really unusual about this is one of the kids, for no apparent reason, has the hiccups throughout the entire episode. I really thought that was going to play into like some of the plot there. It never did.
It feels like there should be a payoff to that, yeah, because they talk about it a lot.
No, as to the quality, I really enjoyed it, despite the fact that it was a Scooby-Doo episode, but and the animation I thought was actually subpar, but they paid a whole lot of attention to the backgrounds, very detailed backgrounds in this. In fact, if you go on a YouTube, and they all seem to be on YouTube officially available to watch, as well as Blue TV. The thumbnails,
Nelvana's actual retro, I think it's called Retro Fun. Their official channel has these on YouTube for free, and it's also on Pluto TV.
But I have never seen as detailed artwork in a cheap-ass cartoon as this one. Honestly, I could pause on any frame of this and just marvel at it. The movement of the animation is questionable, but I really enjoyed some of the art.
Yeah, there's some weird choices there's some post animation pans that are built in. I wondered if it was actually done in widescreen. It seems too early, but yeah, there's some like the animation was done and then the camera like slides over left or right in a really weird way. I picked that out when I was watching it. I think it's a good setup for the series as far as pilots or first episodes go. It's stating itself pretty clearly on what this is going to be. We see a lot of the monsters, and so we see a Frankenstein monster. We see a Wolfman, and we see a Dracula, and there was a Frankenstein guy too, right? There was just a lot. Then there were zombies.
Yeah, there was a ghoul, Frankenstein ghoul type dude.
Yeah, and Nick had brought up Scooby-Doo. There's no unmasking scene because they're not being unmasked. The zombies are zombies. The Dracula is a Dracula, and so on. And the werewolf or giant wolf is named Fifi. And I think that's an interesting setup too, that you've seen tons of shows that look like this, but there's no old caretaker from the carnival that's going to be unmasked at the end. Like they're all real monsters. It is strangely intense at certain times.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you don't have any plot, they're just running from room to room and occasionally get trapped.
Yeah, it's true. It could have gotten old just running from room to room. I think the intensity and the pace of it being so keeping you kind of on your toes really helped it. I mean, you mentioned the quality of the the animation, it was done for ABC in what was it? Originally, it was done in 1995 or 1993. Sorry, 1993, and ran for 2 seasons on ABC. Came back as New Tales from the Cryptkeeper in 1999 on CBS. I understand that animation is a little different, so it would be interesting perhaps to watch season 3 episode and see kind of what the animation looks like there. I, I mean, I enjoyed it quite a bit. There's not a ton to say about it. I mean, you talk about the intensity. They did have to hire they had a couple notes, like number one, the guy at the Crypt Keeper. You talk about his jokes, his puns, so to speak. They were heavily toned down from obviously the HBO series. The same actor did the voice of both, and he found it, I guess, a little bit ungenuine. The way that he had to speak in the cartoon was his quote to it. He wasn't too fond, but he did it all 39 episodes. They were going to use the original puppet, and it was deemed too scary at the last minute. So the original puppet from the HBO series. They also had to hire a child psychologist to approve every episode script to make sure it wasn't too scary for kids. So kind of like the behind the scenes, I would love to know more about that. I would love like a director's commentary or something like that, a producer's commentary to kind of talk about some of this stuff because it's kind of interesting, the behind the scenes, stuff that was going on.
I also kind of liked, and I was reading a little bit about the production of this. In season 2, they add the other horror hosts from the comic books, the Old Witch, and the Graveskeeper, who would compete to host the episode. Obviously, those introductions got a lot longer. I would be interested to see a little bit more. I watched a few, but I didn't have time to delve any deeper.
Yeah, I credit where it's due. As Jack said, John Kasser is who did the voice, and ridiculously prolific voice actor with over 200 credits, who's still working. He was the Crypt Keeper all of the time. I couldn't actually find a time that it wasn't him being the Crypt Keeper. All the movies and up through an appearance in some other movie just like last year. And
I think he has, I believe it was 173 appearances as the Crypt Keeper. Wow. Is what I saw. Wow. Something like that. So, I mean, did it a bunch of times.
That's an incredible loyalty to a lot of ups and downs in what they were doing as far as production. Another thing for context is that I was thinking of Goosebumps, which is kind of, it's playing in the same area of like the same kind of like roughly the same age group, but still like it's got a tiny bit of edge to it. So the books were out at this time and were like very, very popular. The Goosebumps series actually takes a few more years. So this preceded the Goosebumps TV show, but I really feel like it's it's kind of treading the same wood.
Well, what other series can you think of that might have come before this that would qualify as kid horror animation? I mean, I suppose Scooby-Doo would qualify. There must be some others that kind of, they had a Monsters cartoon, I believe.
Yeah. There was the original Ghostbusters series and then the real Ghostbusters. I don't know when the real Ghostbusters would have been, but before this anyway.
Probably 85 because the movie was 84.
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah. But yeah, the original Ghostbusters, which have no relationship other than they had to pay them a shit ton of money,
yes,
were in the 70s. It's also why it's the real Ghostbusters instead of just Ghostbusters when they do the one with the ones you're familiar with. Like I said, I mean, there was some stuff like Scooby-Doo, but those the payoff to those was always that the monster wasn't real. Whereas even, Ghostbusters, it was always a ghost, and so on. But most of them were, it's a scary monster who's actually like, it almost taught the lesson of like behind every monster, like there's actually a reasonable explanation and there's a findable villain. And whereas this one, there's no resolution. The kids run out of the house as the Crypt Keeper's coming in.
This one's actually scary, is what you're saying. And I suppose you could say that there was Bugs Bunny cartoons, probably from the 30s and 40s, where he would be in the dark castle and the monsters would be real and chasing him, and I guess that to a degree that would be the closest to this that I can think of.
I think the granddaddy of this whole like horror for kids would be Abbott and Costello's series, the movies that they did, because those movies came about because all of the original Universal movies were being played on television. They were popular with kids, even though they weren't made for kids. And then you have Abbott and Costello in the mid 50s do the Frankenstein and then the Invisible Man. It's the Invisible Man, which were very much aimed at kids. Like they were very much playing to that. Like you recognize these guys from. So yeah,
the genius of that movie, those movies, particularly the first one, when they meet Frankenstein, is that they're playing to the kids, Abbott and Costello, but the monsters are still playing themselves. They do not very much play to the kids. They stay true to their actual selves, which is what makes it so brilliant. But you're right. I mean, it would be the Headless Horseman cartoon that Disney did.
That's right.
The Ichabod Crane one, for instance, would be pushing it as far as like really a scary thing. That's truly horror more than comedy, because this is more horror than comedy. I mean, it's got a kid's edge to it, but it's more horror than comedy. This series, like Ghostbusters, would have been you say real Ghostbusters before that, but it would be more comedy than scary. It had a little scary, but this would be more in the horror. I can't think of a ton of television shows aimed at children where the horror would be up front before this. So it's interesting. It's an interesting piece, and like I say, I think probably that's why it's fairly well respected. I mean, it's got a 7.5 on IMDb as far as its average rating, which is pretty good for a cartoon for kids.
Yeah. Well, I think it actually respected its audience too, sort of unlike that Kid and Play thing we watched last week.
Yes.
The writing on that one was kind of insulting to its audience compared to this.
Yeah, and you think of the Richard Pryor one, like a few weeks back. It's there was some rough stuff being made as far as, and that was, as I was bringing, like I brought up Goosebumps. That was one of the things that made Goosebumps accessible, is that it was written to that audience and not, didn't dumb it down for them. That's why the series is still popular. I had a good laugh at, because you got the older kid, or at least bigger kid, that has the whole stealing stuff idea, and he drags his
They are
pal
brothers,
with
aren't
him.
they? Weren't they brothers? I mean, it's the same dad. So
okay, so brothers, so he drags them to the house and everything, and they find a treasure map, and the older kid's like, oh my god, like we could be sitting on so much, like we may find this giant stash. I think that we might even find enough to get 2 BMX bikes. like that's a kid that can dream right there.
Dream big. Hey, everybody's dreams on different levels.
We skipped over that they briefly meet a Confederate general as a ghost, which just looks directly lifted from the old Haunted Tank comics.
That's actually interesting, especially that it's a Confederate general. You know, I guess it's 1993, but it's based on a comic book from the 1950s. I'm sure that character was in that comic book, in the Tales from the Vault,
Could be, yeah.
number 34.
Well, I mean, Haunted Tank from DC Comics was seen as okay even up until like the late 70s, early 80s. That it was like, no, that makes sense that you'd be hanging out with a Confederate general in World War II. I mean, I like generals who won wars, but you know, whatever. It's an interesting piece. I'd be interested in some more of these too. It's I thought it
I got
was.
your reference there, by the way. I got that.
Yeah, it's a slow one there. Our listeners will get it right after the episode. There was in fact a toy line. I don't know how many made. I did find an 8-figure set, but it doesn't list any vehicles or anything like that. And I don't know the timing of when this one came out. I don't see a copyright date on it. But it was 2 versions of the Cryptkeeper, one in his kind of classic look, one in the tuxedo look. And then everything else was werewolf, vampire, mummy, zombie, Frankenstein, gargoyle. So super generic outside of the
Okay.
two
Tales from the
Cryptkeeper.
Tales from the Cryptkeeper action figure made by Ace Games in 1994.
Oh, nice.
So it's just, I missed it. Yeah, they're right. 1994. So that's interesting.
There is as I was looking at this, I saw pictures of the I think it's NECA that did the fancy figure, and that looks. I might become a big fan of Tales from the Crypt just so I can justify getting that figure because it's really cool.
The werewolf was made in 1993 from Ace.
Okay, yeah, because
obviously a lot of them seem to be coming from this first episode.
Yeah, I was saying. Yeah, I was thinking that it really all that seems based on the first episode. Although we don't get the Cryptkeeper in a vacation outfit, unfortunately. We just get the tuxedo.
Oh, that was awesome. Him in a Hawaiian shirt. That was great.
Oh,
anything left to say on this, or do we pick our new season?
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this thing up, and we'll tell folks what's coming next season, and then as closer to when the new season starts, we'll put up a teaser of the episodes of the show to be named soon. All right, we are the Cult Film Showdown. You can follow us on Instagram. You can support us on Patreon. You can listen to these episodes on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, please tell us what you've been thinking of the shows, what kind of things you might like to see in the future. If you don't like the shows, totally fine to tell us there because SEO does not care which one, whether you liked it or not. They just like the comments. And in fact, send lots of comments about what you didn't like. It's all good. And we are sponsored by WeTalkPodcast.com, the home of the Octagon. And they have a Facebook and they have a X. And we'll talk to you next time. All right.
All right.